Oh, there we go.
Your light
Did you
changed.
try turning it on and off? Turn it off.
Okay,
So,
thank you. So yeah, I'm here today to present on a referral from council regarding the Cape Roger Curtis rezoning and OCP amendment application. In case people are familiar, need a refresher, this is the application is a purchase from Metro Vancouver of lots at Cape Roger Curtis, and they've submitted an application to amend the zoning in the OCP to create a regional park with overnight camping. So just where we've been, this was introduced to council February 27th, and at that point they referred it to a number of committees. So the Finance Advisory Committee at their March 13th meeting provided comments to council at that point. We went back to council April 11th, where council received referral responses, directed staff to draft amendment bylaws. And so those bylaws were presented April 24th. First reading was given to bylaws 608 and 609, and council at that point requested additional information from Metro Vancouver before referring those bylaws out to committees. Council met again June 14th at a committee of the whole, and they drafted a list of conditions to place on any rezoning. Council met at a regular council meeting July 10th, and at that point they received information. They referred the bylaws to committees, agencies, and public engagement. And so we are in that referral period now. So they referred it to this list of committees and agencies, including the Finance Advisory Committee. And then just on the side then is what we had initially prepared for council at the February 27th meeting, just in terms of required council meetings that would take place. So those are the ones that would be outstanding. So council, after receiving all of the referrals, would need to consider second reading, refer the bylaws for public hearing, grant a third reading to the bylaws, refer to the Islands Trust, and then give fourth reading and adoption of amendment bylaws. And then just also at the July 10th meeting, council made a motion or adopted a motion to direct staff to request a meeting with Metro Vancouver staff for a collaborative approach where Metro and BIM and Squamish First Nation staff would meet around one table to share aspirations, concerns, perspectives on the extensive list of issues raised in the materials presented at the July 10th meeting. And that has been carried, and that meeting is scheduled in September. And then I was just going to go through the bylaws. So we haven't presented the actual amendment bylaws themselves to this committee. So bylaw 608 is the bylaw that would amend the official community plan, and it would change the properties in the application to a regional park designation. And it would add objective and policy to the OCP section on Cape Roger Curtis lands, supporting the creation of a regional park at Cape Roger Curtis that includes supervised overnight camping, and then a policy about that regional park and the campsites, a mixture of supervised overnight campsites, including group campsites, tent cabins, vehicular campsites, but not including recreational vehicles or trailers, walker biking campsites, trails, education programs, interpretive signage, and accessory buildings or structures. And then it would add a policy to our section about tourist management, saying explicitly that there can be vehicular campsites in a regional park. So that's policy 190. Campgrounds may be permitted in a regional park at Cape Roger Curtis and may be accessed by backpackers, bicycles, or by motor vehicles, but not including recreational vehicles or trailers. Campgrounds in regional parks should be connected to a trail network and designed to minimize impacts on the environment and should have on-site supervision. Site design targeting active transportation and transit to the park will be encouraged, while vehicle use to the park should be disincentivized. And then bylaw 609 is the bylaw that would amend the land use bylaw. And so it would place the lots in question, would move them from a rural residential 1 zone, which they are now, to a passive park P1 zone, the same as Crippen Park. And then it would place portions of those lots into this zone variation, so P1C. And the zone variation itself is what would permit the overnight camping use. So it'd be permitted in those gray areas on the map, but not the whole overall regional park. So the zone variation P1C would allow those overnight camping uses, so that list of different types of camping. And what the bylaw would do would say there'd be a total of not more than a combined maximum of 100, and no more than 1/3 of the additional principal uses may be directly accessed or capable of being accessed by motor vehicles, excepting group tent camps and tent cabins. And then it permits one principal use for staff accommodation. So at the April 24th meeting, staff and council advised the need for some additional studies. So transportation demand management plan, transportation impact assessment, visitor management plan. And then following that meeting, the need for a draft park concept plan and a water study analysis report. So all of those reports were provided to council at the July 10th meeting. And so we're in that agenda. And I just have an image here of that park concept plan that was included in July 10th. So Metro Vancouver spending more time and thought into how a campground or how the total park would be laid out with those campsites and trails and other uses. And then this is just a slide that I presented to council in July, just about communication received up to the June 26th meeting. So included in the July 10th agenda, we have received 495 letters from 333 unique people. And as we categorize them, which I always don't like doing into sort of somebody writes you 3 pages and you're like, it's a tick in this or a tick in this. But for this purpose, we sort of collected them to count them. But so 115 letters stating they supported the proposed overnight camping, 223 opposed, and 133 not stated. And then we sort of categorized themes. So what were people concerned with? Sort of what was driving there? If people said they opposed it in particular, or they not stated, what did they say they are concerned with? And so the top 5 were concerns with ferry capacity, fire hazard, traffic, water, and access. And so that is the end of my presentation at this point. And so this has been referred from council to the Finance Advisory Committee for a recommendation. So that's just what's in your agenda is to the recommendation you want to make. Thank you.
Okay. Ready to questions or comments? Diane? Ready for questions?
Yes. Sorry, yes.
Joyce, please.
I'm curious that we are talking about 100 campsites, but not total number of people at those campsites. So one campsite could have 25 people. Like, how is that being managed?
It's true in terms of so their application where they have group campsites, those are larger. I believe the land use bylaw for the vehicular restricts to 1 vehicle, but I'm not sure actually that definition. Yeah, but it's an interesting thought in terms of.
If I may,
Yeah.
my understanding is that the individual campsites, let's say it's a vehicle campsite, would be restricted in the number of campers in that site. So you couldn't have 25 people at a normal site. That would be a group site, but I believe they're proposing 3 group sites where you could have larger groups. And then there's the tent cabin sites, and so those ones may have a little more than what you might typically have at a campsite. But so the population maximum that they seem to be using is about 450 of what the campsite could contain.
I guess my question comes from personal experience with families, including mine, where we would take one campsite and have 2 or 3 tents. So each of those 2 or 3 tents would have 2 or 3 people.
Yep.
So anyways, it's a comment, and I guess I'd be concerned that we're not keeping an eye on that. How many people?
I think that's been part of the discussion is to and most campgrounds have a maximum number of campers per site. So you couldn't have 25 people on one site. That'd be abusive of the camp. But I agree, when I go camping at a car camping site or whatever, we often have 2 or 3 tents in one site. But we also have 2 or 3 sites as well. So, but yeah.
The land use bylaw right now, vehicle access campsite means a site occupied or intended to be occupied and maintained for overnight in either a single tent or two tents. So 2 tents, 2 cars, I guess.
So I could see how you could easily have 6 people per site, maybe more, maybe less.
I just had a quick comment. When I was young, and we used to go to certain campsites in different places around the province, including like Plumper Cove and other areas up in the interior. And we had a lot more than 8 people on a campsite with 1 or 2 cars, depending how people got there. I mean, I don't know if there should be, if that should be something that's clarified. That's just a question. There should be some, maybe a specific limit. But in my young days, we tend to have fairly large gatherings on sites. And it was kind of a party sort of experience. Just a comment, yes.
It may be something that we would want to ask for more clarification in the visitor management plan. And if we look to the provincial campsite rules for any kind of guidance there, their limits are typically 4 adults and 4 kids per site and 2 cars. So, I mean, I can't imagine that this would differ any more from, say, Golden Ears Park or any other local, regional, provincial campground, so.
Except this is through Metro versus through the province.
Yes, I'm saying, but for a guideline, how people would use that site, I think it's reasonable to look at what those provincial limits are.
Just a side comment of experience.
Just jumping on another hot topic, which, I think as finance committee, there is a financial impact in terms of the expectations of the community of how the municipality deals with the capacity of the ferry. We're not subsidizing paying for the ferry, but on the other hand, if it becomes unbearable, the community may be looking to council to try and figure something out. And then also a shuttle, a current bus system, which again, I see we don't pay directly, but it's through another revenue to Metro. But I think we need, right now the ferry, certainly this summer, I think we'd all agree it was close to failure in terms of capacity and issues. And, everyone is concerned whether it's 3 cars per campsite or 2 or 1, obviously on the Friday night and Sunday night, the impacts of this on the ferry. And I think we should be contemplating a condition of Metro, and it's up to Metro to try and figure out how to deal with it, that there would be a passenger ferry from Canada Place to Snug Cove or Bowen. And that they would need to kick in to support that and leave senior governments to support that. And then furthermore, they would actually incentivize campers to use that ferry by giving them priority when they book their campsite and they buy seats on the ferry, they could perhaps jump the queue or have a higher priority rating to encourage use of this ferry. I think we'd also find, of course, the Canada Place to Bowen Shuttle would probably serve far more than just, the campground. The other day, just looking at the number of people pouring on in the middle of the noon ferry when we arrive at Horseshoe Bay, the foot passengers just pouring onto the ferry that time of day obviously indicates a high interest. And that's great. There's a lot of foot passengers, but also, of course, there's a lot of car people. But if there were an alternate way for younger people who maybe don't have cars, or encourage people to leave their cars at home and take transit to Canada Place and take the shuttle, I think it would be worth considering asking Metro to say as a condition of the rezoning that they ensure that there's some sort of passenger shuttle service from Vancouver to Bowen from June 15th to September 15th. And, put it right in conditions of the rezoning, that they get on with dealing with that. There's certainly a sense in the community that maybe the Metro jumped the gun and they're leading their stock, the land, et cetera. Well, I guess we could turn around and say, okay, yeah, you're stuck, but now to get out of that, we're providing a big ask. And because, it's a community goal to improve the ferry service, it's certainly a community goal to have more people coming as foot passengers. And I don't think it's an untoward condition to contemplate that this thing is part of the zoning.
Allison?
I'm not clear, John. Are you talking about a ferry?
A passenger ferry.
Okay, you were using the word shuttle, which to me
Okay,
means
yes,
a
sorry.
dog,
Yeah.
four wheels. Okay, so that's different, yeah. Because I see there's already a 257 Express from downtown Vancouver to Horseshoe Bay. So to replace that with a shuttle bus is a duplication of service. Yeah, so I just wanted to clarify that. But then the other is, I think, we have a cost here for the multi-use path. Was that in the package that everybody got?
Yeah.
Okay, I couldn't find it scrolling through, and I didn't look because I already had a copy from our council meeting. So, can we get into the dollars and cents issue?
Yeah, I think we want to approach that, but Andrew, maybe I can ask you to give a comment or. Sure. And then we'll get into specifics, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of pieces from the council end, that I wanted to highlight that I think are still in progress. So then on June 14th, there was a committee of the whole where we did discuss many of the conditions that we might like to see as a result of rezoning. It was decided not to approach Metro Vancouver with those as a hard set of conditions and instead route them through the staff level for our staff to interact with their staff and discuss some of those. One of those pieces was that was discussed and supported by council at that committee of the whole was a subsidized passenger ferry as well as a shuttle from downtown Vancouver to Horseshoe Bay, and then another one on our side, as well as an extension of transit service as well. I'm not sure if it is a duplication of service. We have seen the uptake of private shuttles from Horseshoe Bay to the Cove that were used particularly by commuters, including myself. It was a very valuable service. So it would be, I think, of benefit to the community to have a service that runs the other way as well for Bowen Islanders that is supported by the region. We know that as a municipality, our hands are really tied as to revenue generation that we can pursue to fund these sorts of things. And in digging into the numbers, we know in 2022 that there were, I think about 570,000 round trip visits to the island passengers on the ferry. We also know, which is a great number to have, because we also know that Crippen Park saw a visitation of about 350,000 people, give or take, and Bowen visitation is estimated at about half of that. So what we're seeing is 170,000, non-resident passengers coming to the island who are being driven by the attraction of a Metro Vancouver property, which is about a third or just under, about 30% of people coming to this island right now are coming to visit a Metro Vancouver property, which is only going to grow as we see the expansion of Davies Orchard, Dormant Point, and this Cape Project Curtis development. So I think the financial piece here, and I'll speak solely to my seat, is that there is a regional responsibility either from TransLink or from the region or from the province to mitigate some of the impacts of this visitation, because we cannot fund it exclusively through property taxes, and even something like a visitation tax, if we could do it, which we can, or MRDT, isn't going to recoup enough to mitigate the infrastructure costs on that. So we need funding for a multi-use path. We need funding for a subsidized water tax if Bowen Island is going to be seen increasingly as a recreational destination on the island. The other piece that I do want to mention that wasn't contained in the report is that might make some of this conversation moot is I believe many around the table are aware that the Islands Trust Executive Committee did meet on Friday and has sent back the OCP amendment bylaw to Bowen Island as not being consistent with the policy statement, which, as I frame it for this committee, I don't know how detailed we want to get about number of campsites and the various logistical aspects of this, given that everything right now is in flux. When I look at the previous recommendation passed by this committee that was to, in a very basic sense, get a business plan for Metro Vancouver to see what it is that they'd like to do from a business standpoint, as well as to ensure cost recovery in the spirit of mitigating impacts, financial impacts on the island. I think that recommendation is still pretty consistent with where we are right now in the process until we get much more detail from Metro Vancouver and now the Islands Trust in terms of what does this OCP amendment, like what is it actually going to look like and how is it going to be compliant with the trust policy statement, compliant with the desires of Bowen Island, and really what does Metro Vancouver want to do about that at the end of the day.
Any comments or thoughts right now? I'll pass on, I guess, a few comments generally in terms of cost implications. Overall, I didn't feel that the multipath commitment from Metro Vancouver was very clear in terms that it was like a best effort. We're gonna help you guys go get funding and work together. And I think something more definitive is required because otherwise it will rest on the residents of the island to fund that. In terms of the traffic study that goes with that, it kind of downplays the requirement, saying that our low speed limits are sufficient so people can ride their bikes everywhere and not be in danger. And I think some areas around the traffic analysis in terms of the financial implications relate to things such as the ferry review that was completed from July of last year. Had a different world, certainly this year, in terms of volumes, in terms of lost runs for various reasons, including scheduling, and the potential for the financial implications of that on residents of the island that have to spend hours, tradespeople that spend extra hours trying to access during peak periods. And frankly, just the supply of goods to the island generally are impacted by all these things during the peak periods of the summer. As evidenced this year, there doesn't seem to be any potential for fix in that particular point. And I thought it was interesting that the traffic analysis picked May 19th and May 20th of all the times in the world to pick for their study, which is when the ferries were canceled, I think at 3:30. And they said, well, that wasn't really an issue because, except there was advance warning of the cancellations. And then I know business people on the island that had to make significant adjustments to try to return. And some were successful and some weren't because there was no priority given for residents in that particular arrangement. And so, and I also looked at the traffic study and as it related to support and the cost of that was the fact that there's lots of capacity, but the capacity only relates to walk-ons, not to traffics during high periods. And so they talk about it, it's almost discounted as an issue, almost entirely. And I think that there are significant built-in cost implications for the island and for residents here. And it also indicated it was going to update. May 19th was not even the start of it was just the first long weekend kind of, that there would be updates through the year based to monitor volumes. And I guess that's something that would need to be looked at extensively. And other thing in the report I thought was odd, it said there was queuing for 290 vehicles. That's wrong. I know it's wrong. Yeah. As we've all experienced.
We pointed out that.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's fine. But there are things about that. I guess my other question as it relates to the cost for the community. These reports are, as I understand it, are prepared for the project generally and by Metro Vancouver. Do we have a process of, I should put it, verification or reviews independent of the parties that are being contracted by Metro Vancouver to do this, to provide I would say trust and verify. And is there a budget built around that or is there a process built? So there are cost implications of that, just a question.
We have the ability to do peer review of professional studies, and the cost is expected to be borne by the applicant.
Okay.
Are we doing that?
We have not done that. We have in the past with other applications. We haven't in this case.
Have we levied an extraordinary rezoning and OCP fee?
Yes.
Which is to cover that.
And we're stacking staff and external costs. And so with increase.
Okay. Judy first. And then yours.
Thank you, Chair. In looking at the March 13th minutes, where we last, this committee last had a look at the original proposal, and that's been modified to a certain extent. I don't see a lot of difference between the discussion and the analysis that we had at that point, and whether or not that's been responded to, and there's changes. The only one that I noted was the possibly an adjustment to the cost of BIM staff resources in terms of Metro saying that all of their staff would be, I guess, sworn in as bylaw officers so that they could impose any bylaw, work with any bylaw restrictions. But that would be on site as well. It wouldn't be necessarily, I'm not sure what the impact would be and whether they've answered that question. So it wouldn't deal with off-site parking problems in White Sales or anything like that. That would be off-site. So I don't see a major change in the adjustments that were made to the Metro second phase of the community involvement and any adjustments that they've made from our original analysis and discussion.
Yeah, and just to add to that point, I mean, the emergency services is an example, in my view, that it was responded to, but we have qualified staff, that can handle anything that happens. And I think there's a broader requirement there. And there are cost implications for that. Joyce.
Thank you, Chair. And Judy, thanks for your comment. I agree. When I reread our minutes, I thought, I'm not sure there's all that much difference here when I compare their updated report. However, we've had a summer of experiencing the effects of the ferries and tourism, and that, I think it deepens the concern for the numbers of people coming onto the island. And the one that strikes me as financial is one that could impact council for sure. I have heard a number of situations that houses were about to be purchased and the decision was made not to purchase because of the ferry schedule and just the sheer difficulty of getting back and forth. This is going to impact the overall market values of our houses if it continues, which will mean that in order to continue the revenue for the municipality, we're going to have to increase the mill rate. So I think that that's something to be concerned about, and it's certainly not going to help in terms of our positioning with other communities for the values of our houses and the taxes we pay. So I really feel that this issue of numbers of people coming on and the impact on our transportation system is a serious one, a financial serious one, not just in terms of the amount of investment, but also if we don't do it or if it doesn't happen, it could impact the overall values of properties on the island. The second point I wanted to make, again, it's related to something that's happened since we last met, and the decision to have Eagle Cliff access the Snug Cove water system. Eagle Cliff needed a solution. I'm not arguing that at all. But I worried at the time, and I still worry, what's the long-term impact on the Snug Cove water system for having that number of properties now accessing it? It's not too many years ago that we increased the overall capacity at Grafton just simply for the Snug Cove users. So we're adding another community. So it puts me on high alert as to what are the overall impacts of what we're doing on the entire island or different portions. So I was very glad when I saw in the Islands Trust report a concern about water and the availability of water. Yes, they all have supposedly access, but we don't know whether the water is actually there or not. It's been a long time since those systems were built. And in the event of a fire, do we have water supply in order to put it out? So those are two kind of weird comments that I have to make about this proposal. And yet it's as a result of what we've experienced over the course of the last few months since we discussed this last.
Yeah, I mean, I think your comments are appropriate. The second comment really applies also to the community, whether or not this park was part of that equation or not, really. It just shows the potential pressure being put on the community as it relates to any number of things that may occur in the not too distant future in terms of development or increased traffic on the island. So.
Chair, if I may just add some additional information in part in response to what Joyce was saying too. Regarding the supply capacity of Grafton Lake for Eagle Cliff, there's ample supply. So you shouldn't be worried about that. I hope that you can rest assured that the volume that is available to support the addition of Eagle Cliff is more than adequate. It includes additional supply capacity and then contemplation of these extended drought periods that we've been having too. Fortunately, Bowen Island residents are very good at water conservation, so their consumption is really low too, so that really helps. And the council and the municipality are keen at looking at promoting and expanding the conservation initiatives and measures out there, so that's something that we'll continue to do regardless of our supply capacity. In terms of supply capacity in the proposed park area, they have, Metro Vancouver has done a aquifer analysis on the existing wells. And so there's 24 existing wells. There's more than enough supply capacity to support the proposed campground. And the analysis on water consumption from a campground is significantly less than that of 24 very large single-family homes, many of which would probably have pools or hot tubs and things like that. And so from a water consumption perspective, the proposed use is probably significantly less than what the existing use allows for. And there is concern and attention being paid to the need for ecological water flows because there's some seeps that the groundwater does provide flow to, like some of the creeks maybe have base flow coming from the groundwater. And so all of those things are being looked at. And from emergency response and fire concern in that area, we will never have any kind of purpose-built reservoirs that are adequate for fighting forest fires. That is not how we design our drinking water systems. So we can expect to have Metro or whoever is developing on the property to have adequate fire suppression for structure fires and to mitigate the potential of those structure fires becoming forest fires, but we can't expect to have adequate supply to fight a forest fire. We did ask our fire chief, to reach out to other fire chiefs of Gulf Islands that have campgrounds. And so far we've heard back from Hornby Island and Main Island. And the response has been that they never get called out for fires ever. Occasionally Hornby Island Fire Chief, and they have 130 or 160 campsites on Hornby. And occasionally they get called out for wasp stings and things like that. But they might get called out. Main Island Fire Chief says he never gets called out ever. And the Hornby Island Chief says that they get called out maybe 5 or 10 times a year, but mostly for wasps.
Thank you. I wanted to just provide a little bit more context to your comments about the market value issue, Joyce. So changes in market value, of course, are impactful to the individual property owner. There's a loss of equity there, maybe increases to mortgage payments, that kind of things. But from a municipal budget perspective, the market values don't, because of the inverse relationship, what we collect from an individual property owner in actual dollars would be the same year to year, given a change in the market value of their home, all other things being equal. Where the park impacts directly finances, again, of course, is changes to the role. So we have, by removing 24 properties off of our roll, we now have a smaller overall assessment roll. And that leads to a redistribution of the taxes that would otherwise have been collected from those properties onto the other taxpayers. So that's changes to the market don't impact, but loss of value on the roll does.
I'm quite aware of that. Okay, but in order to retain that revenue, a change in the percentage has to happen, which is a council decision, and it could have a major impact on council. That's all.
Yeah. And
The one shift I think we're seeing also, which impacts the ferries, is the shift from vacation ownership to full-time ownership. And we may see this ferry issue shift that even more, because people realize they can't come over and use it for vacation use. And they're less inclined to somehow make it work for the family to hold on to it. And then when they sell, quite often it's full-time use. And full-time use may end up putting more load on our infrastructure on the island and also our ferries. Because full-time people may use the ferry more on a commuting basis or regular basis. It's just something to keep in mind in terms of that shift. The other one I wanted to, I reiterate, we did make comments in our previous minutes. And I'm not on Facebook, so I didn't get the Islands Trust letter. But I presume they're very well aware it was previously 24 10-acre lots. It wasn't virgin forest being converted. And that their comments took that into account. Because certainly, there's precedents in other islands where they have created campground. Rucko Park on Salt Spring Island is a great comparable, where it was previously surplus land to a very large farm and was given to the province where it became a park. One minor item I want to make is in the annual, you mentioned in the text of the zoning that there could be staff accommodation for one allowed.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of going, well, we need as much staff accommodation as we can get. So if they want to build 4, why not? And perhaps even encourage a couple family accommodations to be built there because they may have families living on the island that actually work on the other parks, other major parks. So I don't see the need to restrict the amount of staff accommodation. I in fact go the other way and encourage them to go higher. Again, it goes to a comment from the Finance Committee. No one has sort of a responsibility to try and encourage more affordable housing. You need affordable housing reserves, et cetera, so I think we would want to take it, Finance Committee in context, to say we want to encourage more staff housing. And so don't limit it to 1. Think of a higher number.
Okay. Judy?
With respect to the CAO's comments about the water, I'm not entirely, I haven't read that water study for, I don't know, maybe a month now. But it seems to me that there were some issues buried in that in terms of there are 24 existing wells, but whether all of them were functioning at the capacity that was necessary for, I can't remember the details in terms of whether it was firefighting, the pressure that they had, and whether or not some of them were contaminated with arsenic, heavy metals that have happened because of blasting and things like that. So whether or not there's 24 existing wells, but whether or not they were all functional and we can expect, and I'd have to look at that more carefully in terms of the water capacity for there. The other thing that you've just mentioned is that we've had a history on Bowen of having a difference between permanent housing and vacation cottages and people coming for a season and whether or not, but I think that's changed fairly drastically. And we need an update on the, we're supposed to have an update on the short-term rentals and the policy that went in with the last council. I think it was March when was the anniversary of that 1-year review, and we haven't had time to get to that, but there's a whole new phenomenon in terms of people coming over for bed and breakfasts and Airbnbs and various other things. And I think that is something that we have to look at carefully because I think that uses more water and increases the traffic and adds to our the community filling up with people that are just exploring and learning about it without having people that are living here and committed and involved. So, it's hard to get volunteers and it's hard to get, people to support the businesses. It's all short-term, people coming off the ferry and buying a bottle of water and that's it. And I think that all of that is not so much relevant. I'm not sure how relevant it is to this park application, but it's just a reaction to your comment in terms of the demographics changing.
Can I just make one comment first, or maybe additional point? I've already made my comment about the multi-path funding and infrastructure implications for the roadways and stuff, and I think there's more work required in that particular area. My other comment is around Crippen Park itself, as it relates to a marshalling proposal for a shuttle. Like, I'm really supportive of the concept of a shuttle, whether it's marshaled in Horseshoe Bay or marshaled on the island in terms of activity.
Right.
But I think if there's going to be any changes to impact on Crippen Park as we know it in the village area, including the number of parking spots that are available, the use of parking, and the ability of a bus to turn around, things like that. I think one of the long-term implications for us is that we need a commitment as it relates to the additional land that we're going to require for our sewage treatment plant. That's not going to be won't be possible because it's being used for other things. I think that commitment is required like right away, knowing that will be something potentially within 5 years or so, and that it doesn't get sort of pushed aside and overtaken by this other priority. I mean, I say supportive of the shuttle concept. I just almost wonder why can't all campsites other than the group sites be shuttled?
And they should be. And that was at the committee of the whole, one of the pieces that was discussed and supported by council at that point was a reduction in the vehicle campsites to, right now it says 30%, but down to 10%. And then ultimately that everything to the island should be coming by shuttle. And the discussions that, without getting too far afield, I mean, the discussions at Metro Vancouver are really about if there's a desire to create what's effectively a mini park system here on Bowen Island and increase asset holdings on Bowen Island that's going to drive visitation in a way that we can't capture value from, then there needs to be an actual written commitment to fund the mitigation of some of those impacts, because we see it in the sewage. Sewage is a great comment. I mean, everybody that comes to visit Bowen Island lands in a local service area that's serviced by 600 households, I think, and it's very difficult, to ask those households to carry the infrastructure liability of all that visitation when it's really being driven at a regional level. So there are questions of land use and of, land swaps, but then also, and I had this conversation with the BC Ferries CEO a couple of weeks ago, is that Metro Vancouver, BC Ferries, and the municipality needs to come together to figure out what we're going to do for dispersal in Stud Cove. Because even all those people coming off the ferry that we see in the summer leads to longer loading and unloading times, which then, messes up the ferry schedule, which then impacts, residents who are trying to get into work or access amenities from community centers to their kids or grocery stores or medical appointments for seniors. Like it's It is something that needs to be addressed at multiple levels of government, and then figuring out what that actually looks like in Snugco from an infrastructure standpoint. In terms of a recommendation here, again, I would draw our attention to the previous recommendation, which I think could be reiterated with maybe a minor change in language, given some of the infrastructure conversations that we're having here, and I'm happy to make a motion if.
Please.
Okay.
Can I raise my financial questions first?
Sure.
Okay, so I'm just looking at the multi-use path, the costs. And just doing some quick arithmetic, 50-50 cost share from Artisan Lane to Charlie's and so forth. There's 3 items which total $5.9 million that are listed as a 50-50 cost share. So that's half of 5.9, if my arithmetic's correct, is 2.95, so $3 million. So where is our money going to come from for that $3 million? Other than a tax increase?
So to date, the community has contributed less than 25% of the.
That's today.
Yes, and so that would be the continuation.
Okay.
That would be the plan, is that we would continue to seek grants, and I'm sure Metro would want us to do the same.
Okay, so let me finish.
Okay, well, I thought I was answering your question.
Well, I hadn't finished my question.
Okay.
I was doing my background statements.
All right.
Okay, so that's another question. If we get grants, are the grants to be shared 50-50, or do the grants go 100% to what Bowen has to pay? And if the multi-use path to be effective, it has to all be done at once. So getting a grant that'll, that size of a grant is not as easy as getting the little ones we've been getting every year and massing up. Because there's a huge safety issue. It was very evident, on Monday, even when I came down to the cove. With traffic going east, going west, and a whole bunch of bikes going east, and a huge lineup of cars trying to get around them because of all the traffic going the other way. So, that multi-use, that's the biggest thing I'm hearing from people is the safety. And I'm the only one here, and John, that live on the other side of the island. And we're the ones that see it.
You're not the only one that goes to see it.
Well, okay, but you're not every time I come to the house, it's a bike issue both ways.
Yeah, I live farther than John does.
I forgot about you, Andy. Sorry about that.
Part of the advent of e-bikes. Yeah.
Busy thinking there's only 2 on council, but, okay, but anyhow, so where is that $2.95 million, which is our half of the 5.9 going to come from if there's no grants? And even if there is grants, and then the very last bit, the strip down where we widened the path already, a condition should just be that we don't pay for that. That just gets transferred to us or left as a joint holding for the path. We shouldn't be paying or compensating Metro for that strip from Cardina to Miller, even if there wasn't a park. So, and the cost of, the only way to solve the problem with the people walking across the road, because we've looked at that before, is to install a traffic light at Cardina. So when the ferry is loading and unloading, there's a crosswalk sign that says, "Do not walk." We can't, under the Motor Vehicle Act, prevent people from walking across the road. Pedestrians have the right of way. So, and the community is going to absolutely hate having a traffic light. But that's the only practical way to solve, or you put a totally overhead walkway system in. But you still are going to have the issue of them coming off the walkway at Cardina and wanting to go back over to the other side of the road. So again, there's cost to doing all of that. So who's going to pay for all of this? And so I guess, to me, there's got to be a better commitment from Metro for just putting the money into the Cross Island path.
Judy?
Another crossback one.
Okay, Judy had a. No, come back.
There's a couple points that, I'm gonna have a seniors moment and forget what the points are, but, what I noticed in this past weekend during BowFest was that the multi-use path was empty and the streets were full of bicycles.
Yeah, well, then nobody knows how to get.
And it was like, okay, well, that was the most better. But, you mentioned that, we shouldn't be having to pay Metro for use of the multi-use path that is going through Crippen
Well,
Park.
the very last point F, where we widened the path
Yeah,
down by the library.
yeah.
That was Metro expects us to compensate them for that land.
Oh, I hadn't realized that.
That's point F on this schedule, which you've got.
And I think that the calculations, as I understand it, in terms of the multi-use path, is that there's X number, whether it's $6 million or, $3 million or whatever, that if Metro doesn't contribute to an original plan over a much longer period of time, was for the community to pick up
Yeah,
whatever we
that's a
needed
much
to,
longer
that was
period
the
of time.
percentage that wasn't covered by grants. So it's part of our projected budget. And if we get Metro to pay 50%, that is of some benefit, and it could speed up the process depending on what the grants are and how often they're available. I mean, it's
Well,
by
that's-
finance, but
That's my issue is if we're gonna do it, it has to be done all at once.
Yes.
Not spread out over
my
years.
understanding is that Metro is bulking at paying any of the portion of the multi-use path outside of Cape Roger Curtis. And that's the issue that I think needs to be negotiated.
Yeah, the type of was in the boundaries, outside boundaries,
Yeah.
that's been pretty clear, that's why I kind of raised that comment originally as well.
But it's also, I mean, in terms of sitting down and having lengthy discussions and in-depth discussions with Metro about some of these points, it's very, very hard to imagine that somebody's gonna walk off the ferry and walk on the multi-use path over to Cape Roger Curtis,
8 kilometers?
right? Yeah.
Well, they're gonna bike off the ferry.
I'm sorry.
Bike.
Yeah, I
Let
understood.
alone biking, when you see the families coming off with the two adults on maybe a mountain bike and the two little kids on, their little pink things with streamers, and it's like, they're not even gonna get to the school, let alone, all the way across the island. God help us if they're on the S. But all of that.
We're too old and not bike users, Judy. I know several people, and my granddaughter's birthday party, for example, they biked from Coquitlam. It was quite a long hike. It took them an hour to get to the birthday party, but they came on their bikes with the little tandem thing behind with the kid in the little tandem. So, and one of the University Endowment Lands electoral area director, she and her family biked to Ruckle.
Yeah, Jen McCutcheon.
Yeah.
I think the other thing too that's impacted that level of transportation, I mean, e-bikes have just changed everything. I mean, everything. I mean, the volumes have, exponentially grown dramatically in a very short period, and that's going to keep happening.
Yeah.
I mean, because anybody can ride an e-bike, right? Any sort of thing and do a long distance. And so it puts pressure on, again, on our infrastructure and position. It emphasizes the fact that, to expedite that multipath in a relatively much shorter time, because originally it was going to be sort of funded as we could.
Yeah, exactly.
But now this and what's happening, it's not just the park, but it's also this other thing as it relates to behaviors and what's available for people. It has an impact on the community, and there's a pretty significant cost associated with that.
This is
Go on.
someone who drives across the island. We are seeing groups, and I suspect they're arriving and renting a group of bikes at the bottom. And maybe, I don't know if they're consistent all day, if that's an issue. But yeah, the multi-use path, I think the design may be dated. Right now, we're shooting, I think Patrick had said at the last meeting, for a 3 meter width with the yellow line in the middle. And we're not quite 3 meters, part of it coming up the hill as it's various things. And but I think with e-bikes, we're going to find the 3 meter standard is going to change when two bikes are both doing 20 miles an hour on each direction. It's quite a different safety standard with pedestrians in the middle. And that's what they found out on Lionsgate, on the causeway, was the speed of the bike, and a pedestrian doesn't realize his fast bike is coming along and steps the wrong way. Next thing you know, the poor lady went off the sidewalk into the traffic. And that was the last thing, that accident, I think, that occurred before they finally put in the railing. But unfortunately, I think we need to maybe reach out to some groups and try and find out what are the goals and new standards people are thinking about for multi-use paths, because I'm a bit worried by the time we build a bunch more of it, it's going to be obsolete, and we'll be trying to put another one on the other side. I mean, the reality, unfortunately, we don't have the right-of-way widths. We've got geographical challenges, terrain challenges of doing that. But there's certain parts where, you're sort of asking yourself whether it should be on both sides. I think the question about people coming off the island and the long trail coming up from the ferry, I think it just looks like a sidewalk, and the cyclists maybe don't think to use it.
Probably part of that. Yeah, I don't think a curb at this side is going to actually stop anything, but, and that, again, there's implications if we do actually have to put railings up at some point along these areas. That has a huge financial impact as well.
But it actually may help to the issue of the traffic light. I mean, there's jaywalkers as well, right? When the ferry is unloading, people just wander across the street. And so.
Giving them, but you've got a traffic light, I think you can give them a ticket for jaywalking.
Possibly.
Just as a point of order, I think we're starting to.
Yeah, we are getting a bit off. So we're coming to a point where we're over the time allocation that we had for this discussion. There's been some points that have been raised here. Are there any other specific comments that relate to these particular bylaws that you'd like to bring forward at this time?
Well, I would like to suggest that a condition be considered on the zoning itself, that there be an alternate ferry service as a condition of allowing camping for a certain time.
So there is that long list of conditions that council has adopted, and that is included.
Okay.
Yeah.
Only a feasibility study.
It's not a feasibility study. We know we don't need one. We're saying if you're going to allow camping from June 1st to September 15th, September 15 to June 15, September 15, there must be a passenger ferry service that is alternative to the current service running, period.
I don't think it's related to camping. We have visitors year round.
But don't muddy the water. We're saying to Metro, you're adding to a current problem. They have the ability to deal with senior levels of government and give cost sharing. I think obviously BC Ferries could contribute to such a service because it is taking a load off the Bowen Bay run.
Is that Firestone?
Yeah. Or so they.
What number is it?
Number 10.
Number 10, yeah. Actually, it notices, yeah.
So it says subsidized water taxi passenger ferry, possibly coordinate with TransLink and part of Transit Active Transportation Network. Use
for park reservations as well as Bowen Island residents.
Yeah, use for park reservation.
Yeah.
So that is part of the conditions that council has put forward, correct?
Yeah.
What's the preamble? Is it requesting a study on it, or is it just saying this is going to be a
The
condition?
question on a number of these points is how firm or how specific is the requirement from council to ensure like the green light go ahead in terms of some of these things. It's one thing sort of like best efforts. Another question is, do we have very specific points that are must-haves? Or at least not in implementation, but even in planning and funding.
At this stage, council has requested staff to go through this list with Metro staff to basically identify what are reasonable, what are showstoppers, like what need further exploration. And then staff brings that back to council to say, here's how that discussion went. Council has yet to make a final determination as to like what specific things would absolutely be required as part of a successful rezoning. I mean, that would typically come around second or third reading, and we're not there yet.
But I think the direction from the committee is that we think it's appropriate to have fairly specific and possibly firm requirements specified.
Yeah.
Fairly, at the appropriate time, obviously, to support that.
And it's not just camping. I mean, the
No.
land use bylaw is changing at the park or whatever. I mean, and nobody was coming to camp on all the bicycles I saw. There was no camping gear. They were just biking.
There's no camping.
Well, I know, but there's all sorts of people that camp elsewhere. We see them all the time. And I'll keep saying, where are they going to camp?
Anyway.
Yeah, we want it in the text of the bylaw, not a consider.
Or a condition.
Yeah, I think.
I think I have that. So the mayor has provided a recommendation here, which is higher level. And I did try to capture some of your points. I don't get a sense there was unanimity on all the points. So I don't know how much wordsmithing you want to do or include them at all. But I do have something about that condition you're talking about.
Well, we
I talked about.
Yeah, I mean, it is a pretty firm ask, but I mean, maybe we have a vote. As I make a motion that the zoning consider a requirement that for the camping use to occur, there must be a passenger ferry service in place while the camping is occurring in the summer period.
But what about just the visitation for day visitors that are going to come with their bikes and against the island?
Sorry, point of order.
But
Was that a motion?
right now, they don't need a rezoning to get that.
I don't know that that's, within order for this. As it really, I think it's a general comment as it relates to the island specifically. I mean, again, the things are exacerbated by maybe what's going to occur within the park area, but these are general issues for the community. And I don't know if it's specific to the park or are things that we are looking at generally as it relates to part of the municipality.
But they have the ability to say, okay, well, the park's gonna require 8 spaces. So we'll make sure there's an 8-space ferry service running. Even though it probably needs 20 spaces because people that currently can come to visit the park without rezoning change. Because it is zoned as, it can be zoned as a park. The problem they need is they need an amendment to the zoning to allow camping. So we're saying as a condition of the amendment to allow camping, there should be a passenger ferry, period.
Any comments?
That's
Or maybe for
something
discussion.
to that effect up there.
There's a lot in here, so I'm not sure how you, the chair would like to proceed.
Okay.
And then there's
I
the
would-
resolution.
Just looking at all this stuff now.
And the resolution from before, from March 13th?
Yeah.
Sorry, I missed you, some of yours, Allison.
Can you slow down? Can we start at the
Yeah,
start?
Okay.
we're seeing this for the first time, so.
Okay, I didn't
Thanks.
know that you.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is just the preamble, and then this is what.
Sorry, can you increase the font for the whole thing? It's very small.
So I'm happy to make an initial motion and then go from, and speak to it from there. If that-
Why don't we
if that works
proceed
for
on
John.
that? Is that okay, John?
Sure.
Please.
So the motion I have is just I'll just read my screen here. A slight variation on our previous motion. So I'll make the motion and then if it's seconded, I'll speak to it. So move that the Finance Advisory Committee recommend that should council proceed with the next phase of Metro Vancouver application for OCP amendment, Cape Roger Curtis, RZ/OCP file number 2023-0018. Every effort be made to compensate Bowen Island taxpayers with current known and future unknown lost revenue and to mitigate the financial impact on the island's infrastructure, and that a business plan/management plan be presented for consideration. Is there a seconder for that one?
Seconder for that? Judy? Okay, discussion?
So the, just speaking to this motion to open the discussion, the intent here is speaking to the second clause, we still haven't received the business plan and management plan be presented for consideration, and that was an ask of this committee from the previous meeting, so it's something that I still think that we should see. And within the purview of this committee, we still are unsure of responses around compensation for future and unknown costs, as well. The addition to this motion is to mitigate the financial impact on the island's infrastructure. So speaking to issues like the water taxi, or like a passenger ferry is one primary concern. Another primary concern for other areas of the island is alternate access to the Cape, particularly through the White Sails neighborhood. There are other pieces like the multi-use path, and all of those pieces have been advanced by council. We are waiting for responses to them. So we could get into those individual asks, but I believe that, generally they are contained at a, first reading level, staff going back and talking to Metro Vancouver staff about it, and awaiting for response. And that's really what I'd like to see at this moment. We can go through and ratify those at the committee level, but they're already being discussed at the staff level. As well, from this seat, it feels like the ground is still shifting. So a couple of things have happened in the process standpoint where I'm not sure where Metro Vancouver is going to go or where this proposal is going to go, given what we've seen from the Islands Trust Executive Committee, given some of the challenges that have been identified for anyone that attended the Metro Vancouver's Phase 2 engagements and, looked at the draft concept plan and some of the, how would I characterize it? The lack of incorporating community feedback into that plan are pieces that need to be addressed. Myself and the CAO do have a meeting coming up with Metro Vancouver jointly, at a staff and political level to ascertain sort of what the future of this is. So in terms of a motion, that talks about compensating lost revenue and then just broadly looking at the impact on the island's infrastructure, I think that's pretty consistent with what we're doing now, and ultimately it needs to be reported back to this committee after we get responses from Metro Vancouver and after those meetings at the political and staff levels are had.
Just a thought.
Yep.
Are we going to be, as the committee, consulted again in this process? I think essentially we're almost saying the same as we said in the last meeting.
Yeah.
And whether we need to be asked again. I'm just wondering if we don't, rather than sort of going into the whole broad picture, at this point, we're just being asked as the finance committee, what are our thoughts on this zoning from the finance committee perspective?
Right.
And not on the broad, we're not expected to be knowledgeable on all the in-depth and all the other stuff. And it is unusual, it's great we have such representation from council who do have that knowledge, but three of us don't.
Yeah.
And whether we instead keep it simple and just have, these are comments and these are recommendations from the finance committee, period. And then everyone else can do with it what they may.
Yep.
Right, but if we make some pretty, I think we shouldn't say there should be a business plan. We should just say there should be, from the finance committee's perspective, there has to be demonstrated financial compensation to deal with the loss of revenue from the switch from single family to park. And there has to be financial compensation evidence to deal with the issues that the municipality will face, period. And then I think, the other comment, about the shuttle, these comments we made in the spring, we could reiterate them, but or they just stand as comments that were made by this committee and need to be dealt with.
Joyce?
I'd just like to do a little bit of, I like the motion, but I'd like a slight change in wording. That before council decide to proceed.
Where were we?
So that
After the comma, after 0018?
Reading that the finance committee recommend that before council decide to proceed, that there is assurance
Okay.
not take out the should.
Okay.
Now, stepping back, Joyce, we're an advisory committee.
I know, but
So we could actually change the wording, rather than saying that every effort be made.
no, but wait, I'm not finished, okay? Before council decide to proceed with the next phase, instead of that every effort, we put in that council is assured that we will be compensated. So I'm getting to your point.
Taking out a study period and just saying, thou shalt.
I don't know whether, and so I would move an amendment.
Okay, thank you. I can put it on the board there now.
If there's some language will be compensated, it needs to be fixed.
For current number.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry, Bowen taxpayers should be up here.
Yeah, so just take out both taxpayers
Yeah.
and the width.
For.
That's right.
and take out the with after the for.
Mike, second that amendment.
Thank you. Any questions before I call the vote on that? Okay, all in favor? Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
The minutes show the, some of the details and like we did in the last class in terms of the areas of discussion.
Sure.
But I think we're not finished, that's not our final motion, is it?
Well, that kind of.
That's right.
It is.
Okay, what about?
Motion. The question is whether you want a second, you're proposing a second motion.
The amendment is carried, but we haven't
That was
voted on the main
that was the
motion.
vote on the amendment.
Oh, the amendment, I'm sorry, right?
Oh, okay, because I mean, do the committee feel we should put in, definite wording, not a study about ferry, but actual ferry should exist?
Can we vote on this motion so we can move
Yeah.
on,
Yeah.
please?
Sure. Yeah. Okay, so we'll proceed to vote on this motion and we'll entertain if you want to present a motion afterwards. So on this motion, all in favor? Thank you. That's passed. Any further comments or motions, or you want to bring forward a motion?
Sure. So again, the same, actually, did you have it roughed out, Steph?
Is it this one? The passenger ferry?
Yeah,
Is that one?
yes.
There's a few, I don't want, sorry for scrolling quickly. I don't know if you want to go
Yeah,
through these
no,
or
that's the one.
it's just this one?
Yeah. Vancouver, should say downtown Vancouver to Bowen Island from June 15th as a condition.
From downtown Vancouver.
Yeah.
Passenger ferry be provided from downtown.
Sorry, provided or supported, that's strange, but
Yeah.
I don't know what you want to say.
That's fine.
Actually, I'd take out yes, from, as a condition of the rezoning, that is use be incentivized by priority loading triggered by campsite reservation. Yeah.
Do you need that?
Yeah, I think,
An idea.
well, we could throw it in, but otherwise, no, we could leave it out as a suggestion, but I think, what does the committee think? Is there any support for this motion?
Well, we haven't really put it on the table yet. Maybe we should see if there's a seconder for the motion and then have a conversation whether we proceed with it or not, or amend it further.
I'll second the motion so we can,
Talk about it. Thank you. Okay, comments and questions then as it relates to this motion? I'll just say one thing, that it's kind of like one item. And I don't know that this is the complete standout as it relates to what's happening with regards to the proposal for the park. It's an item for consideration. It's included in the current council conditional requirements that are identified. And I'm not sure it requires its own amendment, but I think some of the things we've identified financially is we would like them to be understood as being, how should I put it, as a passive position as it relates to a proposal. That we think the things that we brought forward as it relates to the cost recovery multipath and others, including transportation, are important and should be don't want to say firm requirements, but given the priority that is appropriate based on what discussions that have occurred. I'm just trying to sort of thing. I just think that, I don't know, this is just a stat, like it's kind of a single one-off in my view in terms of the whole thing. Because the shuttle is key. And there's all sorts of things that are key. Judy and then Joyce, please.
I think it gets the passenger ferry from downtown to Smith Cove. I think it gets really complicated. And I think that it's an ideal and it's something that we need to work on, but it might be long-term. I'm not sure the finances involved. It's like a private-public thing. There's federal money, there's private money, there's people that are already doing the work on it. There may or may not be different projects that come up in terms of whether or not there's vessels that exist and whether it should be electric or diesel or whatever. And I think that I think that we have to work with Metro to try and figure out how to get federal funding or provincial funding, and because it's such a massively expensive project. So I think the idea is critical, and I think that it's probably our best case scenario. I'm not sure, even if we had everything in place, how quickly we could pull it off, and whether or not that is fundamental to the startup of anything that Metro has planned for this area. So while I think it's a priority, and I think that it has to be listed, and it's something that Metro has to take seriously, if I were Metro, I'd be in a position of why is that my problem? Why am I left to try and pay for this? That's not what they're in the business of doing, and it has to be. They have to be part of the solution, but I'm not sure that we should put the gun to their head and say, this is something that you have to be able to provide before we're going to consider. So yes, keep it as part of the discussions, but I'm not sure that that's something that we are going to draw the line on.
I'd like to offer an option to the motion that I've seconded. And that option would be that we ask staff to reiterate our recommendations from the March 13th meeting in these minutes. We've all said that nothing has really changed. And rather than going at one, I mean, we've got the concern about ferries in that recommendation. So I'm just wondering if we can bring them forward and put them in our minutes, because we did reflect in our discussion that we really don't have a lot to change.
Yeah.
I think there's maybe been a few new points raised, and so somehow all those points that we've raised that Steph had listed up there, which disappeared.
I'll put them back.
I think hopefully would be in the minutes and would get that we have the following comments, which is, do we need to phrase it as a motion?
And in addition to
The motion just passed. We've got the following comments.
which are in addition to what we did at the earlier meeting.
Yeah.
And then maybe that can be
in addition to the comments
specified
from
as still
March
being-
meeting, we would
still being,
also, yeah. But they
relevant.
need to be, I mean, I would vote for this motion if we're not gonna have if our comments aren't gonna be in the minutes and taken forward to council.
Right. I would also offer that a motion like this would be best considered by the Transportation Advisory Committee.
Yeah.
So it's, Finance Advisory Committee doesn't have to solve all of the challenges with the current proposal and bylaw, and I think they've got the expertise on that committee to really look at something like a passenger ferry, as well as the pros and cons and how to operate it.
Okay.
It is interesting, just thinking about it. In a sense, the three councillors here are in a bit of a conflict. Because, you're later on going to be asked again to vote on the bylaws, et cetera. Yet you're already voting on something now. And then also you're bringing to the table maybe more information than perhaps the finance committee needs.
But I still think if you've got the transportation committee saying they want this, but the finance committee saying this, and I carefully, I tried in my beginning of my discussion saying there is a financial issue.
Yeah.
Right? At some point, the residents are going to be upset and say, council, you got to find some money to chip in to get this going.
Right.
Right? And so I still think the finance committee has a role, and the finance committee can also make an ask that might be impossible. But on the other hand, we're an advisory committee. And the finance advisory committee. So we are, it's just going to go into the, the considerations for Metro is here's a motion from one of the advisory committees that says thou shalt do this. Doesn't have to be done, but it has a lot more clout than merely saying, give consideration. That's why I phrased it that way.
Recommend you do
Because
this.
it's the number 2 issue, I think Daniel listed, right, on the comments. I mean, it's a big deal if we're representing certainly people that we've talked to in the community about this issue, the yes camp and the no camp, ferries come up very prominently to the point that I believe is, we may incur a financial issue at a later date to chip in and try and solve the problem, because we know the big issue is a $200 or $300 million spend on Horseshoe Bay. And that's a long ways off.
Okay, well, we sort of have to come to a conclusion here on this. We still have a few things to deal with. That motion still is on the table. I mean, it could be further amended that we recommend council refer the matter to the transportation committee because we think it's important. And I do agree that it really, there are financial implications, but there is another committee charged with this. I guess the question is whether, I've already made my comments. I don't think I have to say it again, but I guess at this point, is there any other further comments? We can vote on this recommendation and determine whether in fact we want to proceed with that. So we have a mover and seconder. Has there been an amendment that we have to approve here? I don't think so. So we'll call. It's okay.
It's from downtown.
So we'll call, I think at this point, the question, we have to get closure on this point so we can move forward. So I'll call the question. All in favor of the recommendation?
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That all those opposed, I don't think we have to raise hands here. So I think that matter's been addressed. Anything further before we move on to some updates?
Can I,
Well, to Allison's, to reiterate our previous comment.
no, I mean, all the comments we've made today are going to be in the minutes.
That's expectation though.
All right,
Like, yeah,
okay.
we'll take it to.
It's fine, the work is fine, it's better to have.
Okay. All right, so we'll move to updates 5.1. Request for proposal auditor. First point.
Yes, I just wanted to take the opportunity to update the committee that the RFP for the audit services has gone out. It went out on August 16th. The closing date is September 15th. I know all the typical municipal auditing firms are aware of it, so let's hope that we get some submissions and I have asked for a confirmation of a meeting in the last week of September to review those submissions and then make a recommendation to council to appoint new auditor for next year.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Now we'll move on. Capital projects update. Liam.
Thanks, Chair. So the multi-use path continues to be in the planning phase. So as you know, we've got the path that is constructed up to Artisan Lane. The next section is from Artisan Lane to Charlie's Lane. And so we're looking at the alignment and the configuration for that piece, which is moving along. And then the real tricky bit is from the Charlie's Lane to Grafton Lake. And so the most recent direction has been to focus on following the road rather than going in behind and following the old, what's called the water line route. And so we're still doing an analysis on that. From Grafton Lake, I think the road there is called Forester Road, at that, which takes you into the development at Grafton Lake. From Forester Road to Harding Road is the responsibility of the development. So John Reed is responsible for that section, and I know there's discussions occurring with them right now about what the alignment and design requirements are for that next section. And we'll continue to keep our ear to the ground for funding opportunities as that goes along. The community center is moving along well, and the siding has been going up, and so the building envelope is starting to get closed up. We're at about the 50% mark in terms of expenditures for the project, and the constructor has basically said that they anticipate a handover date of November 21st. I'll be honest, I am a bit suspicious as to whether or not we can achieve that. I think that's quite ambitious. And so I've asked for a very focused meeting with them and our architect and the site superintendent and our project managers from WSP to just focus in on the schedule and start to really nail down what the most realistic date will be, so that we can then plan accordingly for the move from this facility to that facility and other elements there. The wastewater treatment plant.
On the community center, it's unfortunate the siding has a lot of oil canning.
Yes, it does. I think it's in part because of the length. I haven't seen, I saw it going up on the backside, which are shorter lengths, but there was some oil canning. What I noticed with the oil canning on the backside was that it actually created what I thought was a nice visual effect of almost like a modeling. But that I didn't get back to Bowen until the 9:20 ferry last night, so I didn't see it driving by.
Okay, from the street. So when I say oil canning, you got that, it's actually roofing material, it looks like.
Yeah.
And it's dimpled in the middle.
Yeah.
It's not perfectly smooth. It's got oil canning. Normally you look up and you see a perfectly smooth roof with just ridges.
Yeah.
And certain processes, how they bend it, et cetera, can result in what they call oil canning. So it would be interesting to ask the architect or whoever's in charge of whether they felt that is expected or not.
Yeah, I mean, I saw the material be formed and on site, and it was done well in terms of the forming and the lay down of it before. I didn't see the installation, the actuals.
Okay, thank you.
The wastewater treatment plant has been a bit problematic this summer, mostly the outfall. So we have successfully completed phase 1 of the upgrade, which is the attenuation tank. And we have done an analysis of the capacity of that, and we have determined that there is sufficient capacity to allow perhaps some additional connection, but we're still finalizing that. We're still working through the details of that. But what has been problematic this summer has been the outfall itself. And so there have been a number of ruptures of the outfall, and we've had divers down to look at that. And so we're really looking at the need to accelerate the replacement of the outfall. And so that should be coming to this committee as well as council for consideration for next year's budget cycle. And then Blue Water Drinking Water project is advancing in terms of the design and the construction for that, which includes some culvert replacements along the way. And then excitingly, we also got funding this year for the Eagle Cliff drinking water system. And so we're getting it federal and provincial funding to support a connection of that system to the Cope Bay system.
I hear Blue Water, about Blue Water, that they found a good well.
That's right. I had a call from Ian Stewart, who's the property owner of the, partner in the property ownership of the 47 acres above Blue Water. And at that time, they had drilled 2 wells, one of which was, the term that was used was unmeasurable, in the sense that they couldn't measure the volume of water fast enough to get an accurate determination of how much water it actually would yield. And so I haven't heard back in terms of they were going to try to get a proper measurement, but the estimate at that time was at a minimum 50 gallons per minute. But it is, I haven't got a full accurate volume reading yet on that one. And they were going to drill a 3rd well, and I haven't heard how that 3rd well went. So very, very positive news.
Because, and I don't know whether it puts into reconsideration the connection to Bolt Bay or not. Because it is quite an expensive piece that may not be.
Yeah, I don't think that will change the plan.
Okay.
Wishful thinking perhaps, but I don't think that will change the plan as it currently stands.
Okay.
And that's it for my update.
Thank you very much. Judy?
Pardon me?
Water treatment?
Oh, the drinking water treatment plant, there is still not 100% online. It is fully functional in the sense that it is filtering water. There's been an issue with there's 2 turbidity monitors which monitor the amount of sediment in the water, and one of the turbidity monitors has been problematic. And so we're trying to resolve that, otherwise it's functioning at the capacity that we need it to. This is another technical challenge that we're overcoming.
Okay. Thank you. We'll now move on to new business. 6.1, expenditure variance reporting update for July 31st. Here's a copy of a revenue and expense analysis general fund, was distributed today. And anything that, I guess, probably with the time frame that we're dealing with right now, Kristen, if there's anything you think that specifically should be addressed, maybe limit those comments if you could.
Yeah, certainly. This is also, it's not significantly changed from the report that was provided to council in June 30th. So I really just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about some of the changes that have happened since then. Liam mentioned, of course, the most significant one that wasn't on anybody's radar yet was this new potential expenditure that's going to be required to deal with the sewer outfall. That was a project that was kind of highlighted for a couple of years into the future, but the condition and the quality of the outfall pipe is significantly worse than what we had imagined. And you know, we don't want to keep throwing good money after bad, and it's probably about the time that we need to consider replacing that. The issue for council is going to be the funding mechanism. The sewer has 0 in reserves at the end of this year. We had hoped to make a $50,000 contribution. We've already had divers out there twice this summer to go and repair and fix it. And those expenditures are quickly burning a hole in what we had hoped to contribute to their reserves this summer. So it's just the ongoing saga of the sewer treatment plant that is something that should be on the radar of this committee and will be brought forward in the future when we've got some estimates put together for that project.
Quick question, is there a long permitting process? Like if you put in a new structure, quite often you actually have to start from scratch on your environmental permits.
That would be a question for the director of engineering, but certainly we'll make sure that he addresses that in any reports that come forward.
So, thanks.
Yeah. From a revenue perspective, I have increased the projection upwards again, which is good and bad. For interest revenue, interest rates are persistently high, and as well our cash usage to spend on the community center construction project is slower, so we've got higher cash balances, but you know that generates interest revenue for us, so that's a mixture of good and bad. Again, that donations piece, that $1.6 million that we're looking for, hopefully to come from fundraising to complete that community center project. Fundraising campaign is still ongoing, and we have not had any commitments to fill that gap, but we are hopeful that team will and some donors will come through. Again, in the end, if we don't have that money, there is an unallocated grant fund from $2.2 million that was received from the provincial government that could consider allocation of a portion of that if required. Otherwise, it will hopefully be directed to some of the critical necessary infrastructure upgrade projects that are needed in the community and other places. So we will just continue to go through into the fall with that kind of knowledge that we are hopeful. Operating budget's coming in at about 98% of what we expect to spend over the whole year. There's variances individually in line items. My report kind of speaks to some of those. I'm not going to go into them in detail. It's all there in the report. I think, yeah, we've got a couple of RFPs out, or a couple that are coming forward on the next council agenda for awarding. So the fire truck was done over the summer. There's a recommendation to award the contract coming forward for the September council meeting, and that came in as expected in the budget. The construction of a fire truck takes place over a really long period of time, 18 to 24 months. So we put the order in now and we don't have to pay for it for a few years. So we have provided in the budget for an annual contribution of $150,000 each year so that we'll have the cash on hand when we take delivery of that truck. We have hired Teresa Ewert. She's working in our Public Works Department to provide some additional support there to that team. And that is going to free up the resources, the capacity among our other Public Works staff to help really front load some of this asset management work that we've committed to get done for the end of the year. So that is going along well. I'm happy to report. And I think Liam mentioned, of course, the work that's going to be done to create the policy for West Side cost allocation, and that's for the Bowen Bay and Blue Water interconnection construction project, as well as now with this new development in Eagle Cliff. Patrick and I have been looking at working on some development, how to create a cost structure if we were going to integrate two systems on the east side. So there's a lot of complementary work that's taking place on both sides of the island from a policy perspective. I think that's it. We're going to start putting together a budget plan and timeline for 2024. So when we have that meeting coming up in September, we'll have some more identified timelines about what our budget process is going to look like this year. So I really just kind of jumped in on this August 30th meeting to provide a bit of an update. We haven't met for a while, so the focus, of course, is to Project Curtis, but I took the opportunity to.
This is going to be a bit more of a normal, a regular meeting, so
exactly.
That will be appropriate at that point.
Yep.
Good question. Which line does the payment to Finance Trust come out of?
It doesn't. It's not part of our municipal budget. This year we spent, it's like school taxes or Metro Vancouver requisitions. It's not part of our operating budget, but we did collect from residents, I think somewhere in the neighborhood of 345 or 350 this year for the Finance Trust. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any comments, questions for our person? Seeing none, we're looking at our time frame, so thank you. Appreciate the reporting.
Yep.
I don't think we have any other business.
If I could throw a dart at the date, I proposed Wednesday, September 27th at 9:30 a.m. I'm looking at Liam and Kristen's calendar. That works for you? Anybody, that works for you? Wednesday, September 27th at 9:30 a.m.
Pretty sure that was clear.
Done, yeah.
Okay.
Judy and.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, we have an agenda review, but we can just move it afterwards.
Okay. That works. Okay. Thank you.
Pardon?
Trust council untendered for me.
Okay, you will look forward to receiving a poll.
Okay, thank you.
We tried.
Yeah, thank you.
Good effort, though. And
Dark.
informational items, I don't think we have anything.
Just the Sophie report and the annual report from council.
Yeah, identified here. Apparently. Question period. Nope. Okay, point 8. Again, we've talked about next meeting. Before I call for adjournment, any thoughts or questions or comments before I do that?
Good discussion.
Thank you, I appreciate it.